It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 356. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Hello.
Kodra.
Howdy.
And Tam.
Hello.
So last week I was kind of quiet. Hopefully I have resolved whatever that was. But every so often, my Yeti decides to install itself as a different driver. And it doesn't necessarily correlate with me patching anything, so I don't know.
Cool.
It's a feature.
Sure.
I'm sure Logitech's wonderful drivers for it are, dramatic improvement. Golf.
Yeah. The software that you now have to use for Logitech devices is kind of a dumpster fire. So this week I have been doing a thing, and I have been leveling Scholar. I finished off Ninja, and that was interesting. That is, it is a class that I appreciate far more greatly now that I've leveled it all the way up to 80. I don't know if it's necessarily my jam, but it was kind of cool.
I need to revisit it because I haven't played it at all since they reworked Mudros.
So there's a piece of wisdom that I was given that the very most important thing I could ever do as a ninja is every minute apply vulnerability. Just do that on cooldown. And supposedly, by doing that, I am more effective than 90% of the ninjas. After having
it's not the ridiculous damage bonus it used to be, so it's not as important as it once was.
Okay, you say that, but in watching when I apply it, bosses just start getting melted. And when
only
it's not
5%.
I get that, but it is a noticeable difference dropping a boss when it's up and when it's not up.
Is that because people see it go up and then start going?
I don't know.
Their burn phase?
Probably.
Maybe they see vulnerability pop up and it signals everybody going into a burn phase. Mm-hmm. And I also have saved up my cooldowns for before I use it. So whatever, be it that it really is magic, or be it that when people see it, they start doing stuff, whatever the case, when it is up, it seems to greatly reduce the health of a boss. And just even trash mobs. I try and keep it up as often as possible. I don't know what the pattern is for attacks as a ninja. I just know the button press order. And if I ever move those buttons, I would be completely lost.
It's true.
I've basically learned it like learning a fighting game. These are the key inputs that I have to make every so often, and it works. But yeah, that was interesting. But me playing Scholar has been really interesting. I'm not a healer by nature. That is not my thing. I, however, am healing Alliance raids and leveling dungeons and various sundry trials. I healed Steps of Faith the other day, even though now Steps of Faith is kind of a cakewalk. I do not feel
this game healing Crystal Tower.
I was going to say,
which was a cakewalk.
Bel, I feel like you're using a very interesting term here, which is to say you say healing, but I am also currently mostly playing Scholar in leveling and 50, 60, 70 dungeon and main scenarios and all of those. I'm not healing. I am pressing Art of War, and EOS is healing.
This is also true. I feel like that's what happens is everybody pulls stuff together and I Art of War and Adlo every so often and things die. But I also don't exactly feel competent as a healer.
You're just kind of fulfilling the green role on the party setup.
Yeah.
I am doing a lot of this too. It's a great way of earning those cracked plana crystals.
It is.
That's my trick. Is I'm going to start leveling up my Scholar and my Paladin so I can get as many cracked plana crystals.
I have basically all of my 520 or higher gear with materia now, in my tank set. So like I have been using my cracked planocrystals. I don't like it's weird. Like me playing a healer is just weird, and it's super slow as compared to everything else that I've been doing.
What? Why?
Like it just feels like it takes forever to do anything. Like basically the template of which I have been leveling doesn't really apply to a healer.
I was about to say, wait, how are you leveling? Because I level in a very specific way, which is I log in and I do duty roulettes.
So I do kind of a lot of different things, and the combination of all of those things adds to 2 to 3 levels a day.
Okay. I mean, I realize...
And some of those are duty roulettes, some of those are clan hunts, some of those are beast tribe quests.
Have you considered doing the some things on the characters that are good at it and some other things on the characters that are good at it? Like, that's why when I'm leveling up my Scholar Arcanist, and I'm doing it all in duty roulette because I get instant queues.
I mean, to be fair, at this point I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 jobs at 80 now.
I guess that's fair.
So, I mean, I kind of use Dragoon as my soak for anything that I just want to do on a daily basis, but like nobody else is of level because it's almost 75. So like I'm in no rush to level Dragoon. So it's just kind of sitting there as the thing that I dump anything I can't do with whatever I'm actively leveling on. But like I'm actually actively leveling on Scholar now. And I'm sitting at just shy of 68. And like I didn't start at 0 on these because at one point in the past I had leveled them all to 50. So I'm just taking things up from 50.
You also played Scholar. I mean, you played Summoner. We talked a long time ago on this podcast about Summoner as your introduction to dot classes. Which kind of
it is. Like, I enjoyed Summoner as a run around and dot the things class, and it was fun. And I mean, I could, in theory, flip over and level as Summoner, but like, it feels like I would be copping out if I did that thing. Because, like, the whole point was for me to level up Scholar, because I needed to get some green jobs off of my list.
I think it's actually kind of funny, because I have White Mage at 80, and Astrologian close to that, but I'm not the biggest fan of Scholar, so mostly I'm just playing Summoner on that side.
Scholar is absolutely me leveling it because it's a 2-for-1. It knocks 2 things off my list. Because like I have White Mage at 50, Astrologian at 60, and Scholar now at just shy of 68. And like I would really like to level all the things to 80 by Endwalker, and I don't know if that's possible because it's taking me about a week per 80. But I've also gotten distracted by the Diadem and leveling Gathering and the relatively easy money that is made doing that. I was in there for roughly 30 minutes and made about 200k on the market and materials.
Yeah.
So
I did a lot of leveling in there. I'm glad that it has a purpose to exist now, which it kind of didn't when it was first introduced.
Well, and it was locked behind another system that you had to have an FC to get to. Or know someone with an
really
FC.
That way. Because you could always just take off from the dock.
I thought you had to like go there by your airship.
No.
I think the Ishgard dock, though, you need to have a party, or at least needed to have people queuing for it.
Yeah, you need to have people queuing.
Yeah, so I think the FC route was the most common, but that is true. There was that dock.
So last week, did I talk about the Palace of the Dead thing?
A little bit.
Namely, the people inexplicably trying to hit 99.99 as fast as humanly possible.
Yes. At least you talked about a guy. I didn't realize it was more than one person.
Oh no, it's so many. It's so many. Like, this is, for the most part, I would say the influx of WoW players has been negligible on most of the game. But for whatever reason, it seems to have deeply impacted the pace of doing Palace of the Dead. And there are so many people that are trying to get to 99.99 as fast as humanly possible so that they can work on the Necromancer title. I finally have talked to like 4 people now that are obsessing over getting blue chests. And there's a couple of different strains that have come from that. One, the first person I talked to wanted the Necromancer title because it's a big flex, supposedly. And there are a few people with it, and which is true. Like, on our server, there aren't that many people that have soloed their way up to floor 200 in Palace of the Dead. There's only like a handful of people per job. But apparently they were watching some video and it said that it was one of the most rare things in the game, and they wanted it for that reason. So like that is a thing. Like, they were absolutely a WoW transplant, and they absolutely boosted their way into a class, and are now they were samurai of all things. Like most people, I've run into several red mages trying to do the thing because, quote unquote, red mage is the easy way to get to 200.
Red mage is the best way to get to 200. But as far as I know, samurai is the best way to get to 100 in heaven on high.
There's a couple of things that I feel like are intersecting here.
Yes.
Because like, all right, at some level, I sort of get it. You've been playing WoW for however many years. You're a big shot in WoW. You've got like 30 different things to brag with, and you come with a new game and you are nobody. And so you're like, I hate being nobody. I want to be somebody like I was in WoW.
And this is a thing you can get solo.
And here,
in fact, you must do it solo.
Yeah, what can I do solo? What is a solo thing I can do to be somebody? So like, all right, I understand all these motivations. You can't roll around in your Bloodfang to show off that you got it way back when, or your, I don't know, whatever is relevant in WoW now, to like showcase how cool you are, or just cycle through all of your cool stuff. But like the thing that Final Fantasy XIV does that I don't think isn't the kind of thing that, based on what little I know of streamers, etc., is likely to talk about, or likely to be talked about, is Final Fantasy is more than happy to put something awful out there for you to bash your face against for years.
Yeah.
And it has absolutely no compunction about that.
Right.
Because all you're going to get is a title. And they're like, yeah, all right, that's a rare
and a shiny
title.
weapon. You might also get a shiny weapon.
And legitimately though, like so Cactuar is a very popular server right now. And on our server, you go look at any of the classes and there's maybe a half dozen people total on the entire, not just our server, that's the entire data center.
Yeah, I can say, isn't it the data center, not just the server?
That's the entire data center. Like, there's only a half dozen people per role or per class that have hit floor 200.
Yeah, you've got Dunning-Kruger in full effect. Where it's like, oh yeah, like, oh man, I can't wait to roll it. I'm a WoW expert. I know MMOs like the back of my hand. I can't wait to roll into this one and show off how much of an awesome player I am. And also look at this fertile ground for me to just show off how much I dominate. I completely understand this mindset. And like, whoo boy.
Like, and that's what I was trying to tell them. Like, okay, I am 99.99, but I got that incidentally over the course of hundreds of runs of Palace of the Dead.
Yeah,
like it's not something that I set out to do. It just happened over time. And the thing is like, once you get to up around 40, 50 or so, like, it's like maybe 1 in 5 chests will give you an upgrade.
Yeah, I
Most
haven't
likely just from finishing a set of 10 floors.
Yeah.
I haven't reset 99.99 because it's a huge pain to grind up.
I've reset down to 60 a few times just to get a shiny weapon.
Yeah, I mean, I did it at one point to get some shiny weapons, but like I don't care about those anymore.
Yeah, exactly. They're not as cool as I once thought they were after spending hundreds of hours in Palace of the Dead watching people run around with them.
I mean, yes, there's also that.
Well, I mean, there's that, but mostly I used them when I chased. Admittedly, I never thought they looked cool. I chased them specifically because I wanted a eye level relevant weapon that I didn't have to jump through awful hoops for, because at the time, the game's way of getting you weapon upgrades, which are your most important upgrade, was awful. So I was like, Palace of the Dead, thank you.
So, okay, random aside before I go into further detail about this subject, I really wish Heaven on High had an equivalent to the 2 weapons that were in Palace of the Dead. Because if I'm rolling around in Palace of the Dead and I see somebody with the low tier version of the weapon, I at least know, hey, they're fairly new to this place. If you've got the evil looking red weapons, oh yeah, you've spent tons of time in here. I don't necessarily need to assist with any advice. But like Heaven on High just has 1 weapon. So like you can't tell if somebody is a day 1 in that place versus somebody who's put in hundreds of hours. I wish there was like a shift somewhere in the weapons, but there's only 1 set of floors per se, whereas Palace of the Dead has 2 sets.
That might also be another reason why people are going for their weapon upgrades.
So, okay, the flex thing I have heard from a couple people. The other person, like this has just been a single person that I talked to that had this take on it, was they were a long-term WoW player, and one of the things they always regretted not being able to get was Undying, aka the title from clearing Naxxramas without taking any deaths.
Across all 25 people in the 25-person version of that instance.
Well, Undying was the 10-person title, but yeah, I forget what the other one was, but yeah, like there were 2 different titles, but they always wanted Undying and never could get it, and I understand.
Look, FF14
fear,
doesn't take that stuff out.
Exactly. That's what I tried to explain to him, is like, 14 doesn't make things irrelevant like that. They don't take stuff out. Like, it's still there because, I don't think it will ever not be an achievement to get 200 floors in Palace of the Dead solo. Since if you take a death after floor 100, you have to start over from scratch. Like, your save game gets locked. You can't go any further.
Actually, if you take a death before then, it still applies. You have to make it all the way without a single death.
Like, it's going to be real interesting to me to see, like, I mean, we clearly have an influx of WoW players, but I'm wondering, like, does anything compare difficulty-wise to
like
pure
Uwu?
Ultimate Bahamut EX Gold Plus whatever?
No, I don't think there's any content in any MMO that compares to Ultimates.
Like,
I feel like some Mythic Raiders suddenly got mad at you for no reason.
I've been through Mythic Raids. I got carried through them.
I know.
Like
you can't get carried through Ultimates.
Right, you can't get carried through Ultimates. Like,
yeah.
If any person dies, like, it's basically over.
Like, I admit that my last like, the last time I was doing any cutting edge raiding in WoW was a long time ago, and the last time that was Kata, and the last time I was familiar with the top end of difficult raids in WoW was like Legion, I guess.
Here's the thing with Mythic raiding though, is like you can eventually overgear it. You can't ever overgear Ultimate. Like, it's always a synced scenario. Like, you're brought to a specific item level.
Well, but even in that particular case, like, I mean, and I made this comment now years ago on this podcast to the chagrin of some people, but like WoW raids were never like FF14 demands a higher level of technical precision from its raids than WoW ever has. And
I will quickly say I agree, but also FF14 messages like 100,000 times better than WoW raids ever did.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is that the thing that makes WoW raids difficult is usually bad messaging, sometimes intentionally bad messaging. But like by comparison, FF14 gives you often perfect messaging.
Yeah.
You just have to deal with the fact that you're getting perfect messaging and like good luck.
Right. I mean, you are learning a dance and then everyone has to execute that dance perfectly.
We're going to tell you exactly where you dance to. Like if I got to see clear indicators before on Hygen as to where all of the dance floors would be, that would have probably been a lot easier.
Wow, that fight would have been like kind of trivial if you could do that.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of WoW fights that I think were hard that if they had FF14 style messaging would be trivial, or not trivial, but much, much easier.
Also, to be completely fair, a lot of telegraphs are missing in Ultimate and Savage raids.
Yeah, but they're missing because it assumes that you have done versions of the fight where you have those seared into your brain.
It's true.
Whereas, like, WoW is not shy about introducing a raid with a mechanic that you just gotta die to and figure out.
Well, like, people learn dances in this game, and then it's committed to muscle memory. Because, like, I've been doing a lot of Alliance raids, and here recently I've gotten a string of the Evilisian raids, which I don't love, especially MathBot, but
I love that place.
there's one that like people just are scared to death of, and it's the Thunder God. Because there's a specific dance that you have to do to keep from getting hit by all the sword mechanics. But like watching someone who knows that dance and following them along, I'm kind of learning the dance, but also it is so seared into like a couple people that I've followed's brain that they are always in the right place at the right time, even though there's really not a lot of messaging. Like it's message based on the position of the swords, but like there's not the lines of messaging. But yeah, like just what, but folks have learned that dance after doing it for an entire expansion.
I was going to say, there's also just WoW raids had a lot more like, oh, the boss might behave in this way or might behave in this way, whereas in FF14, frequently the boss will behave. It's going to do like 36 attacks in order, and hey, if you know all 36 of those attacks, you can really react to all of them ahead of time. And that's how I did turn 9.
Yeah. Well, and like, it's also the reason why Black Mage works as a class in FF14.
Yeah.
Like, that class would be unplayable in World of Warcraft.
Because you really need to be able to be like, yep, I can drop my circle of I stand here now.
Yeah, it's like
I have this many casts before I need to move again. I know I can drop it right here and it will be fine.
Yeah, do you know your dance by heart? Okay, here is the class that rewards you for knowing the dance by heart. If this is a thing you're good at, this class is just going to reward you in spades for it. And like, you know, the what?
I should play Black Mage more.
Yeah, clearly I should too, because I do like dances.
Like, that's Black Mage. Like, I'm not necessarily great at dances, but boy, am I motivated to be good at dances by playing Black Mage.
I mean, when your reward is being able to cast one of the most satisfying spells in the game over and over and over, it helps.
Yeah, like Black Mage is not the core loop of Black Mage is not that complicated. You just need to execute it, and you need to know your timings just pat. But if you do, boy, how do you get ridiculous damage? I mean, I forget what I was playing originally, but it's why I switched to Black Mage when we were doing Titania Extreme, and like that started pushing our damage, like noticeably started pushing our damage up to the points where we needed it to be.
I think you were already playing Black Mage by the time we started doing that fight because you were learning it from doing Eden.
Yeah, learning Black Mage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned Black Mage in Eden. But I think that there's mostly where I was eventually going was like I feel like there's going to be a really interesting like second wave WoW player outcry when they start raiding and see what raids both are and how absolutely cheerfully punishing they will be. Like, I'm not going to go into the group finder anytime soon.
So I've been watching some of this play out because Limit, which is one of the Mythic First WoW guilds, has gotten fed up with WoW and is now playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV and is trying to do Savage content and running into various walls. I've not watched a ton of their stuff, but I've seen, bits and pieces of it. And they're definitely learning as they go, but just because they were phenomenal at Mythic didn't necessarily give them easy wins in Savage.
Yeah, that's not going to be a direct skill set changeover.
And like I've watched people do ultimates and just wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe for like 70 hours worth of wipes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are intended to be extremely difficult for people who are good at Savage raids.
Yeah, like I heard it explained like this, is if you can get through like normal mode without taking any damage, then you're probably ready for Savage. And if you can get through Savage mode without taking any damage, you're probably ready for ultimates.
Do all bosses have ultimates, or is it still just the two?
It's
There's three
at this point.
Okay, so there's Bahamut, Uwu, and what else?
Alexander.
Ah.
Starting with Living Liquid because they know.
Oh, I really like that it's Uwu, by the way.
Uwu.
Yes.
But like
Weapon Ultimate for those not aware.
Those are always going to be an achievement when someone does them.
Yep.
And I think that's what I like about it is like even running older content through Duty Finder and stuff, like there's so many dungeons that I had forgotten and really liked, and now getting to re-experience them again has been fun because like there's enough variety in the roulette.
You can even choose your difficulty level. Do you want to do it synced or unsynced?
I mean, unsynced is not really doing it anymore.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, so like the whole I don't want to lose out on this title because I lost out on one in World of Warcraft. Like I get that mindset because so much stuff has dropped out of the game over the years, but like also stuff that was put in A Realm Reborn is still relevant. Like it's still a valid thing that you can do.
They have only very recently removed any old content, and it was mostly at most players' behest.
Right. I mean, like they removed some quests because they were basically just like running from point A to point B. And Ammo and I were talking about this before we started recording because like I've started years ago I started a Warrior on Pizza Maid's server, and I've been playing it a little bit just to see what the story has changed between how I remember it and how it is now, and it is so streamlined. Like I remember, and maybe I am misremembering this, but I remember there being a series of steps in between each of the first three dungeons.
It wasn't very long. It was like a quest.
Yeah, it wasn't very long. It was
that part has not been dramatically shortened.
Okay. Because like in my head, I thought there was a couple of steps there, and now it's literally, okay, turn in, now go straight to the dungeon entrance and talk to the guy that's going to let you in.
No.
It's not that, yeah.
I think they may have forced you to talk to the Adventurers Guild person, like Modi or Mother Mion or whatever it is. It was still really straightforward.
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward.
The one I remember is they made you jump through so many stupid hoops to get to Titan.
They still kind of do.
They still do.
Okay.
I've not gotten to Titan yet. I'm 35. I've not gotten to Titan yet.
It is far fewer. Well,
Titan was 40?
Titan was 34.
It's 34. So
yeah.
the trial
Oh, it
is,
was
but
30s. Okay.
It was right after the Brayflox long stop.
I haven't gotten to Brayflox Long Stop at 35 yet.
Wow.
The last dungeon, like at 34, I did Todorok for the first time.
I was gonna say, I feel like I have been in leveling queue, and mostly leveling queue ends up being total nap.
I don't know why
Oh.
that seems to come up more often.
As it's required by the story,
because it's
whereas
required by the main storyline and is fairly low level.
and Karn isn't.
There are multiple other other
true.
dungeons required by the storyline.
There are only 3 before that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
see.
Halatali isn't required.
I would say that I see those 3 in aggregate less often. Like I see the 3 of those combined less often than I see Todorok.
It's true.
I think people bail when they see it's Todorok.
Well, I mean,
People absolutely bail when they see it's Castrum instead of Praetorium, because that's happened to me numerous times. Where the party just
enough that I don't actually care.
I get it though, because like it is
Yes, it's worth less XP.
Yeah.
It's worth less XP, and it also requires you to actually be paying attention for most of the run. Whereas Praetorium is just a bunch of cutscenes. Yeah, like you can make dinner while doing Praetorium.
Yeah. I need to get back. I need to catch up in the story. I'm on like, what is it, 5-4?
You're probably in the same spot I am, because like as much as I've been playing, yeah, I've not caught up in the story.
Like, but
I've got one more dungeon to do. I know that much because I don't have expert access yet.
I think that this is a me problem and not a game problem. But like, because it's just not what I've been wanting to do. But it has become so like obviously transparent to me that every quest is walk, talk, click, talk. That I just like, I'm fatigued. I play for like 20 minutes and I'm fatigued. That's been my like last couple of weeks.
So some
I'm
events.
noticeably. This is why I'm really not doing quests, because I don't really want to walk talk. I've been doing a lot of dungeons, and dungeons are fun. This game's got really great dungeons.
Yeah, like I've not felt in a real rush to catch up, although the last series of quests I did made some noticeable changes to the world, and I'm kind of interested to see what happens. Yeah, so like that is a thing that now I see all over the place now that I'm out questing.
oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a bunch of stuff that just suddenly phased into visible range. So I do kind of want to catch up, but also like I've been on this mission of level all the things, and that's had way more of my focus than actually like popping on one of my main classes and finishing off the story, because I can't be that far off from the end. I think I basically have one patch worth maybe left.
I think so. That sounds about right. What was the last dungeon that you did?
You did the thing that caused changes in the world. That's part of 5.4.
Yeah.
Okay. It was maybe the end of 5.4.
It's kind of midway through it, but yeah.
Okay. I mean, I did some quests after, immediately following that, but yeah. Anyway, it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see where this expansion goes. Like, we know where the expansion's gonna go, but like, I'm interested to see how the story wraps up. But like, there's so many systems that I've never engaged with that I'm finally engaging with, like Diadem and the Firmament, and I've done some Baja. It's not really my jam.
It can be a way to level, though, if you like doing that.
It is a way to level, but also like, okay, it reminds me of moving around in Rift. Whereas like you have to be so super careful to thread the needle between packs of mobs or you just get overwhelmed. And I get that's me going in as a solo player versus me going in with a fixed group. But like, it's tiring to cross that map And it's basically like doing fates out in the world. Is you're waiting for fates to pop, but the movement between those fates is tiring. I mean, so it's an upgrade from Eureka, but it's still a little Eureka for me. And it wouldn't feel quite so bad if killing random things actually gave you metal, but you basically just have to do fates to get metal. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ammo, but like it seems like the only way I get metal is by doing fates.
Sorry,
and
what's
not by killing. Metal is the
XP.
alternate leveling system in the game. You gain metal, METTLE.
Oh, okay.
And then you cash that in on ranks, and that improves your alternate leveling system.
Isn't that affected by what area you're in? Like, and your current level, basically?
I think, maybe.
Yeah, if you're in like the higher zone, you will get more metal and stuff.
Right, but like it doesn't seem like the random mobs that are not associated with fates give me anything other than the chance of getting a cluster or whatever those things are.
Yeah, clusters or essences, which are handy for using in Bosnia, especially if you do like Castrum and stuff, but you also get those as rewards from doing other things, so there's not a ton of point in grinding. I mean, they do the thing where certain mobs will increase the chances of XCE popping and stuff like that, but you don't. Yeah, you don't really get the metal from grinding like that.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like my focus really needed to be run to a fate, do the fate, run to another fate, do the fate, because I'm getting the little drops through that, and I'm also getting the locked chest that way.
Yep.
Which mostly reward crap, but like occasionally something interesting drops. I feel like the interesting rate is significantly lower than like Palace of the Dead or Heaven on High. I have a lot of sparklers.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a lot of prisms from Palace of the Dead, too. Heaven on High seem to have a much better interesting rate.
At least on Palace, I got a lot of clear dim materia, which in itself sells well. Anyway, last week we didn't really talk about this in depth because we knew Tam would want to talk about it, but Wildermyth?
You know how I've been complaining about the lack of co-op games, and I wish people would make more of them. Well, people finally are.
Yeah, Wildermyth is really cool.
Yeah, it's obviously it's clearly inspired by D&D, but it's inspired by the kind of D&D game where everyone has multiple characters and like stuff happens to those characters. And it's a kind of D&D game that I've never run, but I've had like plans around in the background. But like Wildermyth goes through like generations of heroes and stuff happens to them, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's terrible. Weird stuff can happen. It's like it's like a board game with all of the automation done for you, which is great. And it's got interesting kind of tactical grid turn-based combat. It's got charming little story segments that are randomly generated and involve your characters.
Yep.
And you can play it co-op with three people.
Up to 4.
Oh, up to 4 people.
Yeah. Theoretically, you might be even able to play with 5, but 5 is the number of people that can be in a party.
Yeah, I don't know what the limit of a lobby is.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it's neat because you sort of like go through these fantasy stories and roll new characters, and then every time you finish a campaign, your characters have a legacy, and like you can either bring them back in later games if you want to just keep adventuring with the same people, or you can roll up new characters and have them, or a mix of both.
You can also have people do your legacy when they die, apparently.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can also have really weird stuff happen to your character. Like, we're playing this multiplayer, and in that game, we had somebody who's slowly turning into a rock. But I have been playing a little bit solo in some of the random games, and I now have somebody who's slowly turning into a bear and not so slowly turning into a wolf, and not so slowly turning into a crow. So it's got a lot of interesting things happening in it.
Yeah.
The tactical combat, like the way your characters level up really lends to sort of like this random like, oh well, I'm gonna deal with what I get, but like you're definitely trying to build characters to like maximize your synergies type of thing, and it leads to some really interesting battlefield tactics.
Yeah, the choices that you make relatively few choices, and you have relatively little control over what your choices are, but your choices are very impactful.
Yep.
Which is an interesting, it turns into an interesting mix.
It is definitely a bummer for like, oh, I want this character to be a melee rogue.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're getting all of the best ranged rogue things. And this other character is getting all of the best melee rogue things, so suddenly they're just better at melee roguing than you are.
Yeah. So it's like you don't really have a lot of control over how your builds coalesce, but your builds will coalesce.
Yep.
And it keeps the game fresh, because you're like, all right, well that didn't go how we expected. What happens next? And yeah, there's a bunch of interesting. There's just a whole bunch of interesting stuff that you can do, and it's fun. It's fun just like working your way across the map, beating up bad guys, and seeing what weird little side stories crop up. It is a game where wandering around and exploring and having stuff happen is interesting and good. Which is not always true of games that have those things, and I think that's a big point in its favor. It is a little bit awkward in multiplayer, because there's a certain amount of like stomping. You can sort of stomp over other people's actions, because like you can see everybody's cursor on the screen and what they're doing and where they're clicking, and so like sometimes there's a bit of, okay, everybody stop. Who is doing what right now? So that you're not like one person is opening, because if you like open a window to do a thing, then that opens for everybody, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes people are clicking elsewhere. So you got to be a little bit like it takes some conversation in the same way that like playing a board game around a board game table would.
Yeah, I would say that. Having now played it single player, I still think it plays better multiplayer. Just because while like, yeah, you're kind of stomping over each other, queuing up those actions together makes the game move faster at least.
Yeah.
I also would say, and this is something we aren't doing, but I partially because we're not necessarily the most theatrical, but it would be really fun to play with a bunch of people who want to like voice act the scenes.
Oh man, I that wasn't even where I was going. I think it's fun to play. I think it's fun to I think it's interesting to have like intensely dysfunctional parties.
Oh, I mean,
because your characters all have personalities.
Yes.
And like you can play as a bunch of people who like get along and want to get the job done, or you can play as some like absolute disaster piece theater kid drama.
Well, and hilariously, there's some mechanical benefits to having rivals on your party.
Yeah, like because it's like because we like thus far, I think there's been the like, oh, does this character have a crush on this other character? And be like, well, no, but like mechanically we should be.
We did have one where he said yes.
We did have that.
Sometimes you don't have a choice.
No, we definitely had a choice, but it was the two eyes lovers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a thing. Together they have two eyes.
Together they have two eyes. One of them is slowly turning to stone, and one of them had their eyes gouged out. Eye gouged out. It's weird.
It's super charming. Like there's all kinds of crazy things that can happen. It's super, super charming. It genuinely like the writing is great.
And
the writing, it's one of those things where the writing is great without like trying to think of how I would describe this.
I feel like it's a slightly more serious Order of the Stick.
Yeah.
And I get strong Order of the Stick vibes when I play it too, in all of the best ways.
Yeah. It doesn't. So other thing that I've talked about in the podcast before, there's been a bunch of good writing, especially in indie games, that has been good because what it does is it targets your heartstring and then yanks it as hard as it possibly can. It's just like, we know we're gonna target a particular emotion and we're just gonna hammer that button really, really hard. We want 14 sads out of 10. And this is like, honestly, it doesn't seem to want that. It's not going for like the strong emotional reaction. It's just going for like stuff happening. And like sometimes stuff is kind of sad. Sometimes stuff is really funny. Sometimes it's a bit of both. Sometimes it's nonsense. But it's lighthearted.
I had in my single player game, like it started off pretty dour, then it got a little hopeful, and then it like ended on this beautiful melancholy. And like I was like, you get choices, like it's all branching. And so one of the things was one of my party members fell ill. And like it was an incurable illness. And then one person, like somebody was like, well, I know of a cure, but like it cost my sister her life, and like my father died of the disease because we couldn't recover it. So we go on this epic quest to go recover the cure. And like when we finally do, you have the choice of you find in the cave the sister who was turned to stone. And you have the option of curing yourself or curing the sister. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Mechanically, it's probably bad if I don't cure myself because this character is great. But let's see where this goes. And I ended up having to bury that character in the peacetime that year. But the person I rescued joined the party out of like a sense of duty to this person. And it was just a really beautiful moment. This game has lots of like, you feel heroic.
Or possibly the other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, or for villainous.
Well, but it manages to do that. It manages to accomplish that even with low stakes. Like there's a lot of low stakes that's what I'm looking for. There's a lot of low stakes heroism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's cool. And I think that that's hard to do well, because you've got to make somebody care about like the baker's sister or whatever. Some totally random NPC that isn't like a major player in the world in any sense. And that's not easy.
Oh, another interesting thing. This is definitely a adventure game where you should probably be splitting the party. And that leads to some interesting things too.
Yeah, there is a time management component when you're not actually in battles, because the enemies are advancing their plot at whatever rate, and eventually they'll spawn more corrupted areas and more.
They'll amass more troops and their decks will get that much harder.
Yeah, those two.
Like, so enemies have a deck of cards that determines how difficult they are when you encounter them. And so if you just sit around and do nothing, they will just keep getting stronger and stronger. And then they will incur and start raiding around tiles. We are currently playing on a pretty reasonable difficulty mode where I feel like we mostly are able to handle things. I did bump it up to Tragic Hero to see what it was like, and it is awful. Brutally hard.
I do wonder if some of that expects you to have built up more stuff in your legacy.
More of a legacy? I wonder that too.
Because that lets you do things like make elemental weapons on demand, or recruit this amazing bard mage that we had in our first game. In a sense, like, this game was initially pitched to me as being a kind of a roguelite, and I guess I see where that's coming from. Because, like, if you completely fail, then yeah, that's kind of not great, but you can use the resources you did get to add stuff to your legacy, possibly level up characters in your legacy, and start better next time.
But like those characters also cost more legacy points.
They do, but it's one more legacy point per level.
It's true.
That's a cost that I'd probably be willing to pay.
It like the amount of power you start off with in any given game doesn't feel like it's growing that much. Maybe I will be proven wrong eventually. Or maybe the options just become the ability to craft whatever you want becomes more valuable. But yeah, I imagine there's something legacy points going on there. I don't know. I like the art style is absolutely gorgeous, and their ability to like, oh, okay, you've set your character's appearance, and now your character is going to age, and like the way they apply aging effects to all of the various characters is very cool. And like after you complete your first step of your campaign, like you get a certain number of years of peace. And then your characters do things. Maybe they get married. Maybe they have kids. Maybe their kids decide that they want to be a part of your adventuring troop too, and they want to show up their old man about how much better they are than them.
Maybe they just do nothing in the interim. They just like mess around. Sometimes they're lazy.
That has happened sometimes.
You also have hilarious character growth. Like we had Dara in our very first game was sort of like, she was a goofball. She was our hunter and she was a total goofball. And she was like, I let my whims take me wherever I want. And one day the whim took her up a mountain trying to get a egg from an eagle's nest. And we had the option of being like, no, Dara, that's a bad idea. But we're like, no, Dara would totally do this. And then the eagle totally like knocked her down the mountain. She lost half her health and also became like noticeably less of a goofball. Because personality stats are still stats and you can still adjust them with events. It's also amusing how easy it is for me to remember these characters' names, given that they are all procedurally generated, because they really do make you feel like these characters have a personality. Like the writing is very good at making characters feel like they have personality.
Yeah. Well, it's using a very Paper Mario-esque art style.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does some subtle, because it's such a simple art style, it's able to do like subtle facial expression things that you still pick up on because it's such a simplified art style. And it does there's a lot of work being done to get this like paper look to it. I mean, it looks very much like board games moving around on a board.
Oh man, we had the adventure we just started was literally 3 people whose first or second stat was snark, and it was a lot.
It's so funny. Like
we are constantly sniping at each other.
That's why I say like it's every bit as amusing to have a complete disaster party as it is, like honestly even more than it is to have like a wholesome functional one.
Yeah, our characters in the first campaign got along great, and it was still interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, our characters in the second campaign are mouthing off at each other kind of often.
Yeah, and
eventually upgraded their relationship to frenemies.
Yeah, and it's an interesting space that like doesn't get super explored all that often, especially when you're dealing with players who have a lot of control over how their characters act. Like there's a reason why movies with dysfunctional groups of people are compelling. Like dysfunctional heroes are compelling because like they get things done, but there's this like sharpness to it that's hard to get if just like, oh, everyone gets along. There's no like underlying anything, but it's hard to explore in like an RPG when you have a lot of control over the characters, especially a multiplayer one where everyone is trying to be like, either everyone is trying to be
let's not cause friendship damage from this RPG.
Right. Or like doesn't know where the line is the other one that you see. so it's hard to hit. It's like, and it's interesting. It works here because you don't have that control over what your characters are like, or like what your characters say, other than like some dialogue choices. But those dialogue choices are based on your character's personality.
Yeah, so instead you just sort of, oh, well, let's see what type of character I want this to be, and then the game will decide what they say. You do, for your initial 3 characters, get the decision of, like, some of the relationships, whether they are romantic, friends, or rivals.
Yeah.
But for the most part, those just develop.
And there's
usually by spending time with each other.
I mean, and there's some stuff that's like, hey, what happens if you have a rival, like a really developed rival, and then something bad happens to that rival?
Yeah.
Like, or you've got a fully fleshed out, like, lover's relationship with a child, and then something bad happens to somebody. Like, you're only going to see that on difficulties high enough to actually cause bad things to really happen to you. And that's interesting to me.
It is. So one of the things that I think the game could improve on is having the difficulty scale a little more. The game, in the couple of times I've played it, the game feels hardest at the beginning when you have less options, and then you snowball once you start to get options. And so
I generally think that kind of thing is intentional, especially in a roguelike or a rogue-esque. Because if the game gets too hard, you want, I think that for something like this, you want your difficulty curve to taper off faster than your power curve, because the more invested you are, the more frustrating it's going to be to hit a spot of difficulty that you can't overcome.
That's
until the
fair,
very end.
But the challenge, yeah. The very end should definitely be. I actually think the very end could have stood to be a lot harder.
Yeah, we absolutely trashed the end of that. Well, I mean, the end of the tutorial, I guess.
And especially knowing how the death mechanic works, where we could have been like, oh, well, a character died. Now, like, they're gonna go out in a blaze of glory and like kill everyone around them.
Yeah, which is a really cool. Like, yeah, going out in a blaze of glory is really cool, but like, you're not gonna do that. That either happens early and randomly, which isn't terribly interesting or satisfying, or it happens in the final, like, devastating fight.
But like, when I was playing on the harder difficulty, I had characters were just dying left and right, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get over the hump here. Like, I'm going to have to really, really be careful early on in the game. But then, like, once I get to the mid-tier, once I get a little bit more options, then it'll probably ease up on me. And, like, I think I would prefer it to be a little bit more opposite, where I could be a little bit more invested in my characters, so that, like, yeah, when they do die, like, okay, well, that's terrible, but at least now I know. At least like, their story had a conclusion. But yeah,
it's a good game, Bront.
It is a very good game. I would say look it up for the art alone. Like, just look up some screenshots. I think the art is great. And like, all of these things are being told in this little comic strip vignette. I love it. I love the aesthetic of this game.
Yeah, Ash, this next topic, your adventures in art software. That sounds interesting and slightly ominous.
That's not that bad. So I'm trying to learn things. And once upon a time, there was this piece of software called Photoshop that you could buy and install on your computer. And
good old days.
I did this in college because, one, I could pay student prices for it, and 2, there were no alternatives. Not really, anyway. GIMP existed, but GIMP has always existed, and GIMP has always been terrible. Yes, it's still terrible, in case anyone's wondering. But hey, the advent of time and competition and people not wanting to pay Adobe something like $20 a month just for the purposes of using Photoshop, there are now alternatives. A big free one that I would say is actually pretty good is called Krita. I haven't done like a full feature comparison of it or anything, mostly because it supports animation, but not quite as well as I wanted to, I guess. Another thing was again, still free, is Glimpse, which is GIMP, but by somebody who thinks that the name is maybe something that should change, and also maybe the UI is a thing that someone should pay attention to at any point ever. That's better. Like, it's not great, but it's better. But what I'd really say is there are like 2 major paid options now that I would call excellent that aren't from Adobe. I guess 3 if you want to include Procreate, which is an iPad app.
Procreate is pretty awesome. Like,
Procreate is amazing and only $10.
Yeah, I'm not an artist. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be an artist, but like, I doodle occasionally in Procreate, and it's great. The
downside is Procreate wants you to have an iPad that supports the Apple Pencil.
It's true, which is not a small outlay.
No.
Yeah.
But if you have a PC, there is, I guess, the 2 things that I would say I think are good and would recommend at this point are Clip Studio Paint, which will run you $50, or Paint Tool Sci, which will also run you $50. They sort of have different strengths. Clip Studio Paint's big one is that it can use Photoshop-style brushes and supports a number of things like shape tools that Sci just doesn't have. It used to be Manga Studio and also supports a limited amount of animation, although you can pay them a lot more money and get better animation support.
It's true. Those versions do occasionally go on sale.
It's true. Yeah. Clip Studio Paint goes half off kind of more often than I think. I think it's since the start of the year, it's happened twice, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty regular for the base version, which for most people is certainly fine. I've upgraded to the biggest, baddest, exiest version just because I love Clip Studio Paint, and it's pretty much what I use all the time now.
And I'll throw this out there too. If you're actually looking for a direct equivalent of Photoshop, Affinity Photo does a really good job of literally being a Photoshop clone.
That's true. That is true. I've used Affinity some. It's been a little while. I just think the layout really confused me, and I feel like you have to spend a lot of time learning the layout.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, cutting my teeth on Photoshop and like using nothing but Photoshop for years, it was just Photoshop. I mean, It's exactly the same. There's also, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, that is a free web-based Photoshop.
Photopea?
Photopea, yes. That actually works shockingly well. And I've used it a couple of times when I was on a computer that was not my own, but I needed to do some quick editing. Or like knock out a graphic or something like that. It is purely competent enough for that sort of stuff.
I think the thing that moved me from, okay, I'm probably never going to use Photoshop again, was Paint Tool Sci, which is a little easier to learn than CSP. Like, there's just a bunch of things it doesn't do that CSP does, but it's a lot easier to learn.
That's fair.
And another thing it has that Sci doesn't is support for binary brushes, and therefore it's way better for pixel art. Way, way better.
Yeah.
But in the past few months, I've gone from, I remember using Photoshop, I was terrible with it, to, okay, I think I can get by with some of these things. But
I don't think
we'll
I
see
even...
what comes of that.
Yeah. Oops, I was just going to say, I didn't even realize I supported animation stuff because I have not messed with that in a long time on there. That's interesting to know.
Well, way back in the day, there were basically like 2 camps of photo software or like image software. There was the Photoshop camp, which was very much photo manipulation, but also could be used for painting. But really, it was photo manipulation that it was designed for. And then there was the Painter line, which, God, I don't even remember who originally owned Painter. No, before Corel, somebody else owned it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember who originated Painter.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you.
But then Corel bought them, and then now someone else owns it. But then a lot of other things kind of went down that fork, and I think that's kind of the Clip Studio Kai path, whereas other things went down the photo editing path. And it's been so long since I've used an actual Painter app.
Yeah. Before I used Corel, I used Open Canvas, which kind of feels a lot like how Manga Studio felt, and now Clip Studio Paint. That was one. I don't think that one was very well known at the time, but going from that to Painter felt weird. But when I went from Painter to Manga Studio and CSP, then that felt familiar to me again.
No,
Painter
one that I
was
haven't tried,
very-
but I know exists, is called Fire Alpaca.
I've never tried that.
I think it's another one that's trying to be a free Photoshop clone, but I don't know what it supports and what it doesn't support.
I think my problem with being so used to Photoshop is that everything to do with Photoshop is mostly committed to muscle memory at this point. And it would be very hard for me to pick up something else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what is your long-term goal, Ash, with these softwares?
For the most part, just like some relatively simple illustration things. So like when I want a picture of something, I can just make it myself rather than having to try to find something.
Mm-hmm.
Or get Ammo to do it for me.
I'm
I'm
way
just
more apt
sort of
to commission
poking my
Ammo
head
to
in at
do
this
things. Although it's been a really long time since I've commissioned you to do anything Ammo.
I think it has been a little while. That's okay. That's all right. You know where to find me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the last thing that you did was the PSO2 PSO2 character.
Yep.
Yeah, I know we got a really late start. I'm trying to gauge if this next topic is something we can get into or if we should start to cut things off tonight.
I think we should just about at the end, I think. I do not think this next topic is going to be short.
I don't either. Like, I think that's almost a show in itself.
I managed to do the seaside of the summit.
Congratulations.
So we're working our way through. Next, I just have to do the core, and then it's into Farewell Part 2. The core, I think, is where I'm supposed to learn about wave dashes.
The core seaside is where they teach you about hypers.
Yeah.
Close to temporal.
Is that different than wave dashes?
All this.
Not really.
Okay.
That reminds me, just the talk of illustrations and stuff getting done. My tabletop RPG setting book. I should start thinking about illustrations for, especially because it's at 140 pages now.
That's a heck of a setting book.
Yeah, you're going to need a lot of varied kinds of illustrations too, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, so like when I've looked at setting books before, there's a lot of illustrations. I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I don't know if this thing is ever going to get published, but it's its own problem that I don't really care about at the moment.
I would assume there's like technical map work as well as like just illustrating environments and things in the world.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully when it's done, it's a place that people find interesting.
It's fun to play games in it thus far.
And on that note, I guess we will wrap things up. Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.